Welcome to the Estate Expectations Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Pickle. Thank you so much for joining me. This is episode 2. I'm so excited, you guys. I'm like a little kid in a candy store. I hope that you are just as geeked out and nerded out about estate planning as I am. You're probably not the case, but thanks for humoring me. On this episode, I want to talk a little bit about the basics, if you will, of estate planning. Let's call it estate planning 101. And so, I think it's important to define what estate planning is and what it encompasses. I think there are so many definitions of estate planning, and that's just because attorneys like to come up with several different terms and names for the same exact thing or the same exact concept. So forgive us for that. But let me read to you my definition of estate planning, and I'm sure this will probably resonate with most people. Estate planning is the process of creating legal documents and strategies to manage your assets, your healthcare decisions, and the distribution of wealth upon death or incapacity. It includes wills, trusts, power of attorney, and healthcare directives. Okay, yawn fest, right? But I think that's a pretty good foundational definition of what estate planning is. What I always say, especially when people come to me or they call me and we have a phone consultation, they'll say, "Hey, Liz, I need a will." And my response to that is, "Well, what makes you think you need a will?" Okay. And sometimes they look at me like I have 3 heads. But it's meant to elicit a bit of, a little bit of introspective questioning around, why do I need a will? Because your next door neighbor said you needed a will? Because your coworker has a trust? Okay, so estate planning is not about documents, right? It's about a plan that's curated, especially for you, for your family, for your business. And every estate plan is different. No 2 estate plans that I have ever drafted are alike, and nor should they be, because you are unique. You are special. Your family has their own particular dynamics and needs and values and visions that is not the same as another. So if I can get any kind of a concept across to you, it's that please don't think of estate planning in terms of documents. Think of it as a plan, a life plan, and a plan for afterlife, okay? And so when you meet with an estate planning attorney, and you should seek out an estate planning attorney because we are specialists, we are not general practitioners. You wouldn't go to a general physician for heart surgery, right? You want a specialist. They will also explain this to you, that it is not about drafting documents. It's a plan. And so you may hear some key terms that are thrown around quite frequently, and terms like executor, personal representative, beneficiary, probate, living will, guardianship. The two terms that people really seem to get hung up on a lot is the will and the living will. Those are vastly different documents. And so the will, also known as the last will and testament, is, yes, in fact, it is a document. I hate using that term, but it's a directive where you state your intentions as to how your assets are to be distributed and to whom, and to what manner. And that includes financial assets. It includes personal property. The living will, however, is another name, essentially, for your advanced healthcare directive. So that's a directive where you state how you want to be treated around the cessation of life, your guidelines for the cessation of your life. So if you are incapacitated, if you're in a coma, how do you want to be treated? How do you want to be allowed to die. So it's very different than the last will and testament. So you learned something there, hopefully, about the will versus the living will. And the other term that people get a little confused about is the executor versus the personal representative versus the trustee. So here in Arizona, we use the term personal representative. Executor is also used, and those terms just mean they are the individual who you have appointed to oversee your estate. And so your personal representative or your executor would take the will and they would submit it and file it to the probate court. Versus a trustee, who is the individual who manages and facilitates the administration of your trust. And those are two completely different tools. A will and a trust, very, very different. And we'll talk more about those in future episodes. And so the goals around estate planning, are pretty common sense. They're asset protection, minimizing taxes, ensuring your family's security. If something happens to you, what's going to happen to your family? And then some of us are interested in wealth preservation and generational wealth. And that's a real buzzword these days, generational wealth. I know that I'm from a blue-collar, hardworking blue-collar family, and my parents didn't have the money, and they couldn't afford to send me to college. And so I did that all on my own. I paid for school, paid for law school, still paying for law school. And, it's tough. And just turn on the news these days, and you'll see it's getting even tougher. And while I have estate expectations for my son to work hard, be an outstanding citizen, and take care of himself and his future family, I absolutely want to create some generational wealth for him and trust that he will be, he will be ethical, and he will be, he's going to be entrusted with wealth, and he will do the right thing. And so preserving wealth for future generations is one of my favorite things to do with clients, to talk about, to plan for. So I guess if I had to say that was my specialty, that might be it. And so, those are the general goals of estate planning. And that leads us to the question, who needs to do this type of planning? It's really easy for me to say everybody, everyone over the age of 18, because everyone over the age of 18 is going to have estate planning issues, period. Full stop. There's no question. We're all going to die at some point. I hope that we're not all going to have injuries that lead us to incapacitation, but it could happen. So I think that regardless of your age or your wealth, that it's something that everybody should consider, especially during your key life events, your marriage. That's huge. When we get married, we're taking responsibility now for not only ourselves, but for our partner. And so many people think that, well, if I'm married and I die, my spouse gets everything. That's not true. That's not true. Please hear me now and believe me later, or believe me now and hear me later. I forget how that goes. It's not true. It is not true. You have to make sure that your spouse is protected, taken care of. And the same goes with having children. Who needs estate planning when you have a child? And especially if you're single, right? So if you're single, now you have to take into consideration, you don't have a spouse that, most assets are going to flow to your spouse. But if you're not married, what happens now for your children? Is there a guardianship plan in place? If something happens to you, what happens to your child? Not in terms of the finances, but in terms of who's going to take care of your child. In many cases, I will look at my clients' family dynamics, and I think that guardianship planning sometimes is more important than asset protection and preservation, because if something happens and you leave it up to the probate court to decide who is going to take care of your child, who's going to have custody of your child, well, some people will tell me, my parents will step in. Well, maybe you don't want your parents to step in. Sorry, mom and dad, but it's true. So everybody, no matter your wealth, no matter your life stage, has issues that are going to necessitate some type of a plan, especially if you're starting a business. Business owners really need very specialized advice on incorporating their individual planning with their business succession planning. And so again, I think it's very, very frustrating for me as an estate planning specialist to hear the common pushback that it's I can't afford it. It's so expensive. And look, I know it's difficult these days. I mean, where was I? I won't name the grocery store I was in. I won't name names, but I'm aghast. I am aghast at how little groceries I can acquire for $200 these days. It is expensive. Everything is expensive. But I think what it comes down to is you have to decide what you value and the things that are most important in your life. And if you're building wealth, and you should be, if you're saving for retirement, and you should be, if you have a family, and if you're an entrepreneur and you're building a brand, then it's part of life. It's part and parcel. It should be part and parcel of everybody's life and everybody's business plan. Okay. Getting started with estate planning. So how to get started? We have a great little workbook that we give to prospective clients. And I'll tell you, if you want to email me at support@themindfulcounsel.com, and we'll go ahead and link that in the show notes as well. I'll be happy to send you this workbook. And really, it's just a matter of starting to first create your list of assets. What do you own or potentially own? Sometimes we have real estate that we have a mortgage on, but I would list your real estate as an asset and list your liabilities. And that includes, personal property, digital assets. Your digital assets can be digital currency. It can be even anything stored in the cloud, photos, website domains, your social media. So make a list of all of your assets, identify your beneficiaries, and your beneficiaries would be the people or the charities that you want to benefit from your bounty, from your hard work, from all of the wealth that you've acquired during your life. So identify the assets, identify your beneficiaries, and then it's just a matter of seeking professional guidance. Now, I hesitate to mention the online platforms. I always call it legal doom. Now, okay, I'm going to be mature about this. In most cases, I'd rather have you create a plan on LegalZoom or a template or a state, I guess you'd call it a state sanctioned or a state government style fill in the blank will. It's not optimal because remember, if you go back and listen to my story about when I created the will for my grandfather, it's all about you don't know what you don't know. And that's the case here. You can fill out a template, but if you don't know the questions to ask or the issues to spot, you're filling out a template that 50-50, it might work. Hopefully it does work. But you can start there. You can start to look, obviously, You can Google estate planning documents. You can look on these online will-making platforms, estate planning softwares, and there's actually a lot of good books out there. If you go on Amazon and look for estate planning books, there's a ton of resources out there. I'm sure there's even wills for dummies, which is like literally an appropriate term. I'm kidding. I'm not calling any of you a dummy. But you understand where I'm going with that. It's so important to have a professional to consult with, to ask questions, because that professional, if they're worth their weight in anything, they're going to know the appropriate questions to ask you, which will then trigger these aha moments. Okay. So I really just want to encourage you to take the very first step with the suggestions I just laid out to you. And I don't think there's much more in this life that can bring you great peace of mind than knowing that you have a plan. And if something does happen to you, everything you love, everyone you love is protected and cared for. And so peace of mind means a lot in this day and age. So I hope that these tips were helpful to you. And, if you ever have any questions or if you ever have any interest in additional topics for future episodes, please do write in to me at support@themindfulcounsel.com, and we will add those to our future episodes. Thank you once again for listening to this podcast, Estate Expectations.